I want to tell you, a story of two people's youth group experience. I got permission this time. Sometimes I forget to get permission, but this time I did. My oldest daughter, Virginia, went to youth group from the time she graduated to Awana for like 6 years, 7th to 12th grade. She showed up at youth group. She was there every time. She, listened to the teaching and sang the songs and, paid attention. You guys know Jenny. She paid attention. I had asked her how was youth group, and she would tell me what she learned from the talk there. And but she would before she started driving, I'd pick her up, and she would always be like the first one out the door. She'd be just right there. And for 6 years, nobody talked to her. She's quiet, she's shy, but not shy as she used to be. She's not as shy now as she used to be, but nobody engaged her. Nobody would come and talk to her. I can't say nobody. Sometimes the leaders did a good job of that, and she actually got to be good friends with them. But it was really hard season for her. Now, my second child, Joseph, is a very different personality. And he had a very different youth group experience that he's having right now. And I talked to one of the leaders, and one of the things they told me about Joseph, and he's very friendly. He's a great guy. He's friendly people. But one of the things they told me that really warmed my heart about Joseph specifically was that, not that he's friendly, but he was friendly to everyone, and he greets everyone, even the people that maybe you would not tend to want to greet, or the people who are kind of off to the side or distance, right? And I didn't ask him. I don't know if actually part of experiencing, like Jenny's experience, made a difference for him. Did that have an impact on you? I can ask you right now. No. It's just the way it did. But that sense of their experience, now you just chalk it up to personality, right? Oh, well, one's quiet and the other's more outgoing, and that's just the way it is. But I think it has to do with our topic this morning about hospitality and making people feel welcome. And I think that the quality of our life and what we experience in life can be drastically different based on this little concept, which is actually, I think, the very heart of the gospel. So, as normal, we're looking at one verse this morning. If you want to turn to 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 9. I'm going to start at verse 7 and kind of ramp into it as we get there. We've been the last few weeks. This is what we looked at. So 1 Peter 4, beginning at verse 7, says, "The end of all things is near. Therefore be of sound judgment and sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. Above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins." And then our verse, "Be hospitable to one another without complaint." So, we're talking about hospitality. I've phrased this, I think, in 8 different questions to answer. The first one is, what is it? Hold on. It's always the first click. Look at you. There it is. What is it? So, from the Oxford Dictionary, hospitality is friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. So, you could say being friendly or generous, but especially to strangers. And the reason I'm going to pick that up is because of the Greek word, which is in the text. Yes, it is. There it is. Because I know you guys want to look at that Greek word. Philoxenos. And it's actually a combination of 2 words, which I want to look at, because philoxenos is actually used 3 times in scriptures. I'll show you where they are. But philos is the concept of being a friend or friendly, like Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. It's friendliness. And xenos is a foreigner or stranger. So, xenophobia, afraid of foreign things, afraid of things not like you. So, philoxenos, that Greek word, is specifically talking about, and it says be hospitable, it's talking about friendliness towards strangers. And I just want to show you some scriptures about those two words, because there are some more of those specifically. So for philos, to be friendly, I just want you to see kind of what Jesus said about these things. So, yes, it's there. There it is. Luke 7:34, Jesus said, "The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, 'Behold, a gluttonous man and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.'" So, who did Jesus spend his time with? Who did he associate with? Now, clearly, he spent a lot of time with his disciples. They went and did everything together. But when he went to these dinner gatherings, when there was parties that he attended, where was it? That his critics were saying, "Oh, you just hang out with tax collectors and sinners all the time. Theirs are your friends." So, go down a few more chapters. Same gospel, Luke 14. Jesus went on to say to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers, your relatives, or rich neighbors. Otherwise they may also invite you in return, and that would be your repayment." He says beyond that, continue on. Instead, invite the people who can't pay you back. Invite those who would not get invited to every other party that exists. The stranger, those who are easily forgotten and not as easily seen. Then Jesus said this at the last, it was actually his last meal with his disciples before he headed to the cross. In John 15, this great discourse of what he said to the disciples. He said, "Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. And you are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." So the concept of, okay, we want to be friendly, we want to show hospitality, but I want to challenge us also, who are we showing hospitality to? It's really easy to gather around ourselves people who we like, people who think like we do, who vote like we do, who eat the same kind of food we do. And that we should do that. I mean, the scripture says, "Be hospitable to one another." He's talking to the church. We should do that, but just recognize that part of hospitality is that second part. It's not just philos, not just friendliness, but also philoxenos, which is to the stranger or the foreigner. I think I need to replace the batteries on my clicker. There we go. So the xenos, the foreigner or the stranger. So again, a few scriptures where this word is seen. This passage, it's kind of long, but it's worth it. The sheep and the goats, Jesus told this parable in Matthew 25. And he was giving a description of well, I'll just read it. You can tell. So Jesus said, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger,'" that's xenos, "and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in? Or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will answer and say to them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me." So Jesus is laying down the standard here of when again, we're supposed to show kindness to everybody, right? We're supposed to be hospitable and take care of the sick and the prisoners, of all types of people. We pray for the Christians who are persecuted and in prison. We should be doing that. But specifically, he said, it's even the least of them. You're doing it to me. We're doing it literally for Jesus. So then in 3 John, John said, "Beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren." Again, we're showing hospitality to one another, whatever you accomplish, but especially when they're strangers, especially when they're not as well known. And so here's this concept of hospitality. What is it? There's a couple other key verses The specific word philoxenos isn't used, but it's a derivative of hospitality. The first one is Romans 12:13. To contribute to the needs of the saints to practice or pursue hospitality. That's just as part of the instructions that Paul was giving to the church in Rome at the end, to practice or pursue. I like that. My footnote says, or pursue hospitality. And then Hebrews 13:2 is always a favorite one. It says, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. And so here we're understanding the concept of when we're showing hospitality to strangers, it might be an angel. If you know them, you know they're not an angel, right? So that's another reason to do that. So where are these? Again, I said this actual word, philoxenos, is only used 3 times. So 1 Peter 4:9 is one. The other 2 places are 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:8. And both of those are talking about the leaders of the church, or the typically called the elders, and the qualifications for them. And it's in both of those lists. And it doesn't really say anything about it. It just says that they should be hospitable. That's it. And so that got me to thinking to the second question. The first question is, what is hospitality? So you got being friendly, specifically to strangers. So why would this be an important thing for the leaders of the church to be hospitable? Why is this on the list? Why is this a necessary thing? So I want you to think about this. That we're actually supposed to share our lives with one another. We're actually supposed to be good friends and generous in sharing what we have with one another. That's the life that we've been called to. That is supposed to be the norm. And if you've heard me talk enough, probably my favorite analogy of the church is the family of God. We're supposed to operate as a family, and take care of one another and share our lives with each other. You think about the early church. There were no church buildings. There was no place for them to gather. Occasionally they would go to the temple, or they would have a big gathering place. But their normal gatherings was going to be at someone's house. Like somebody had to open up their doors, or there was no place for the church to meet or to gather. So, again, for us, we can just come to this building and we can do events here and be hospitable here. We have an outlet for that. But think if this didn't exist and we still wanted to operate as the family of God, as the church of God, how would we do that? Well, somebody would have to be hospitable. And we did this, when 10 years ago, when we started as a church, that we met in people's homes, in the back rooms of storage spaces, and wherever we could. And we required hospitality for that to happen. A great picture of this is in the book of Acts. Again, the very beginning of the church. It says, day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple. So they had a gathering place in the temple. And then continuing, and breaking bread from house to house. They were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart. So this sense of, again, sharing this life together, eating together, and doing it from house to house. So why is this important for the leaders? Because community will not be built if the leaders don't lead the way by example. And so you see that. Here's my third question then. The other key word here is we're supposed to show hospitality without complaint. And so why does it matter what my attitude is? And maybe that's a no-brainer. Of course it matters. But I think it's worth addressing. But first of all, I wanted to put this word on here because it's fun to say. This is without complaint, or it's literally more like murmuring or muttering. We're not supposed to mutter under our breath. We're supposed to do it joyfully. But it's gangusmos. And everybody should say that. Gangusmos. See, isn't your day better now for that? So don't do it. Don't do gangusmos, because that's murmuring or muttering, but it's okay to say it, and that can make your day better. So it's not just like, oh, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, this is my obligation, or I have to do this, or those people coming over, I got to get something ready. But there's a sense of, this is a great proverb. Proverbs 23, 6-8 says this, do not eat the bread of a selfish person or desire his delicacies. For as he thinks within himself, so he is. He says to you, eat and drink, but his heart is not with you. you will vomit up the morsel you have eaten and waste your compliments. See, this is what happens if we just be like, well, this is a command. This is the Bible says I have to show hospitality. I better do it. It's not going to work. You can't fake it. So I would say, actually, that showing hospitality with a bad attitude is probably worse than showing no hospitality at all. If you're not going to have a good attitude, just don't be hospitable, and we'll actually be better off as a church than if we try to fake it or think we're supposed to do it, but we really don't want to. Don't do it because you have to. Do it because you want to. So that takes me to my fourth question. Well, why should I want to? I don't want to fake it, so I'm just not going to be nice to anybody. So I'm going to share some of these things I got from, of course, my Google searching. That's how I do great research. And this one, just Christian homeschool mom, and I thought she had some good things to say about hospitality. So it was hospitablehomemaker.com, so you can go read it for yourself. But she said some things like this. Community is cultivated day after day in homes, at coffee shops, over service projects, in church services, and a million of other places. So I want you to catch that. It's not just inviting people to our homes, right? That's when we think hospitality, that's usually what we think of. But I want you to think about that. It is actually more of a mindset than a location. But she goes on to say, it's something we must intentionally do. Making connections and forming community is good for our souls, and it's transformative for society. And you actually heard it a little bit, even in Elisa's report. The last 2 years, as a culture, we have not had opportunities to create community. It's been very difficult. And some of us have found ways to make that work and struggle around it. But it has been a challenge. And even what Elisa said is that there has been this hunger for it because it's so hard to find. But it's also hard to do. People don't connect with us the way we want. I want them to connect in this way or do this certain thing. It might feel a little pointless, like is anything getting accomplished? It feels like a lot of work, and it's hard to see any sort of specific results. And so that day-to-day nature of hospitality can really feel insignificant. But I want to assure you it is not. God cares about hospitality, and I believe that it is designed, He designed it, God designed it to be a powerful, transformative tool that can change the course of everything. Hospitality is the chance we all have to join in God's story of reaching people with relationship and intimacy. You think about cultivating community is our chance to fulfill those one another commands in Scripture. It was a while ago sometime. We did a whole one another series. We looked at all these different commands. And the heart of every one of them is really hospitality. How do we do that to one another? Hospitality is the context in which we evangelize and disciple. It's the context in which we live out our theology. So I can't help myself but go to my favorite diagram that you see all the time in the Room of Fellowship. And remember, these aren't pillars, but they're branches. And we have the foundation, the church as a whole, right? And prayer. This is our foundation. And even I want to say about the Council of the Worldwide Church is that requires hospitality even among churches, from church to church. If we aren't loving and caring for other people within other churches, we're not going to see this lived out, the concept of the worldwide church. So we need to be praying for churches, visiting with people from other churches as well. That gives us that foundation. But every time I do this, there's always spiritual growth and mission on the side. Sometimes I interchange them, but I always put building community in the middle, because it is the heart of what is happening. And all of this together creates discipleship. So we're talking about hospitality, and hospitality, it says, is the context in which we evangelize and disciple. So I want you to think, hospitality is the context in which we evangelize, there's our mission, and disciple, spiritual growth. It's the context. It's where all of that happens. So if you try to do, this is why they're interwoven vines and not not pillars. If you try to do spiritual growth outside the context of community, you get sort of like like a stale class lecture, right? And I can tell you, here's all the truths about what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, and here's all the beliefs. And what people will say is, well, what does that look like in real life? And I want to see it lived out. How are they going to see it lived out? Here. And if we go and share the mission, we try to evangelize and tell people about Christ, and we just like, hey, I want to share the gospel with you, and give you the gospel, and then I leave. Now, share the gospel all the time, any way you can. But if you share the gospel and they receive it and leave, somebody, whether it's you or somebody else, has to bring them into community so that they can continue to grow in that gospel. It is the heart of everything. So it is really, I would say, that hospitality is the heart of the gospel. So I have to flip the other way sometimes and say, okay, well, hopefully we would be motivated to do that. But what if we're not? What if we just aren't hospitable? What are the results of that? That's my fifth question. And I would say this: relationships will not be established. Community will not be built. Evangelism and discipleship will be formulaic. Okay, we'll just follow a formula, but it will also be less effective. And our theology will remain separated from our lives. You know, I did a 2-week class on the core beliefs. That was part of why I want to do that. I want to look, here's the beliefs that we have. These are our doctrines and our standards. But how does that really affect our lives and the way we live? This is the reality of what we're trying to do in hospitality. Question 6 then, a little bit of practicality. Now you're all inspired. We're going to be inviting people at homes all the time. Maybe this stuff's going to happen. Okay, but how do I do it? And some of you are like, well, that's a stupid question. Everybody knows how to do hospitality. Well, I used to think that. I used to think everybody knew how to have a conversation. I used to think everybody knew how to tie their shoes. But it's just, reality is that some of us don't. So let's just talk about it. And this, again, from my intensive research online, I got from it was like a business website called peopleresults.com. But I thought their synopsis of hospitality, like, how do I do it? Just in a nutshell, when it comes down to it, being hospitable is about focusing on the other person. I just stop right there. I don't know how to hospitality. I don't know how to set a table correctly. I don't even know how to cook. Just ask my wife. But hospitality is about focusing on the other person, understanding their needs, and offering to help them to meet those needs. Think about Jesus for a second. What did Jesus do? Jesus, okay, he's sitting at the right hand of the Father. He's in a wonderful spot. He doesn't need to go anywhere else. He's in the perfect spot for himself. But instead, did he think about himself? No. He thought of the other person. He thought of us. And because of that, and he understood our needs. What are our needs? Our needs is that we're sinners, that we're separated from God. We can't have a relationship with God because of our sin, and we need a perfect sacrifice for that to be made right. So he thought of the other person. He understood our needs, and he offered to help them meet those needs. And so instead of sitting up at the right hand of God and just looking down and be like, I feel really bad for those guys, I really wish they'd get their act together, what he did is he came down. He came to the cross for us. That is the definition of hospitality. So, in a nutshell, what is hospitality? But here's some just kind of behavior, some just common sense behavior from contentmentquesting.com. Invite someone over. Welcome them in. That seems like a no-brainer. Ask them if they want something to drink. Okay. Okay, those are great. Number 4 is the key. Talk to them, listen, and show genuine interest. Again, it's focused on them. Some other practical things, I think, if there's a meal and they want to help prepare it, let them help. Bring them, include them on the chore chart, right? If they ask, what can I bring? Take advantage of it. Have them bring something. At least in Living Word, we do potlucks all the time, right? Bring meal. We do it Wednesday night. We do it once a month here at Living Word. We're doing it next week with pie. We could just
we could just kind of, the church could just pay for everything and cater in a meal, and it'd be more expensive on the church budget for one thing. But there's more to it than just the church budget. It's actually about feeling like a part of the community. And there's sometimes I don't bring something. It's okay. It's not like if you don't bring something, you don't get to eat. No, we just come in as part of the community. And there's a feeling about that. So that last one is, you just think about what's warm and welcoming and friendly, just overall. And how can I do that? I mean, it can be as simple as, greeting somebody. Be as simple as going over and talking to them. And so, my summarization for that one is really this. Focus on the other person's needs and what would make them comfortable. All right, last two questions. Next one, I've got hospitality. How can I grow in it? How can I grow in it? And these are just a couple simple things. So first of all, see the need. You remember when Brad Hayes was here, he talked about that. He talked about when he went to Romania and that one little kid, and how that just his eyes were open for the first time ever. And when Brad was here, he said, there are needs all around us. We just have to open our eyes and see them. And it was within weeks after he said that I got an email from the school district that said, hey, there are a lot of Nicaraguan families that just don't have housing. Do you have any housing available? And so we had what I had set up to be a men's mission house. So I have any men in it at the moment. And I was like, well, here's a house. And so the reality is that the needs are here. And this school system is inundated with little Nicaraguan children that don't speak any English, and the school district doesn't have enough teachers that can communicate with them. And the kids pick stuff up; they're learning quickly. But it's kind of they just showed up in August and enrolled these kids in school, and there's a lot of needs behind that. I just mentioned that as one. There are more needs. We look around our neighborhood. Let's go second. Start close. I always talk about our prayer square. There's nothing magic about our prayer square. It's just, what's the blocks around us? Who are the people around us? And what are those needs? And what can we do about that? So, where's your prayer square? Where you live? Mine's easy. I got two neighbors, and they're both named Mike. So, that's it. It's living out in the country. But, you can expand beyond that if you need to. So so see the needs, start close, and then welcome. Just, welcome people in. Sometimes might think, well, I don't have enough time to show hospitality. I would just say, just invite people into what you're already doing. It doesn't have to be another event on your calendar. Some people are maybe concerned about finances. It costs a lot of people to host people all the time or whatnot. And I would say, there's ways to do that. Again, have them bring food along. Meet at a park. I mean, it's getting warm, so I can say this, right? Meet at a park and have a picnic. In 6 months, we haven't been able to do that, so the time is coming, trust me. So just, don't think about the things of hindering, but there are ways to overcome them if the desire is there. And then the last one in there is, it doesn't always have to be formal or planned or stressful. If it's less stressful, you're more likely to want to do it more. Unless you're my mom, and then she'll make everything complicated. But she likes to do it. She'll just do it. It's a gift. But if you're like, that's my point. So if you guys are like, well, to be hospitable, I have to have a theme for every time I do something like my mom does. You all say, well, I can't do that. Well, you don't have to. It doesn't have to look that way. But it's really cool when it does. And all of this is really building community. So the last question I want to get to then is about being hospitable with, and what I call is my neighbors, but I'm talking specifically about people who are not Christians, right? So how do because we do want to show hospitality to one another and build that community, but we also want to do that with non-Christians. And so here's a list, if you want, about this. I just want to say a few things about this. So the first one, have a heart and not an agenda. Again, it goes back to last week's message, which said, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. So just love people, okay? If you're going to spend time and be hospitable and just invest your time with people who aren't following Jesus, Their lives are going to be a mess. They're not going to do things the way you think they should. I mean, that's true of Christians, for that matter. There's just going to be a lot of things wrong with them. So just love them. Don't have this sort of agenda like they have to follow this and this and this. They have to be this. They have to believe this sort of thing. Just love them, because love covers a multitude of sins. And then secondly, pray. And we talked about prayer. We've been praying. Just pray for people. Pray for the lost. We used to have. We should get some more. I see this time. They used to have over there these little things of people to pray for. And I encourage you. You don't have to have a formal card. Just write it on your paper right now. I encourage you to always have 5 non-believers you're praying for. And I want you to see this. I'm not specifically see it because I have names on here, but I just want you to see that there's a lot of scribbles and things on here. And sometimes it's because they became saved. Praise God. Sometimes they moved away, or I just didn't have as much contact with them. But then I just put another person on the name, and I just keep that in my Bible. It's like a bookmark, so I see it once in a while, and then it's a reminder for me to be praying for the non-believers. Do not underestimate the importance of that. The third one up here, it talks about get over yourself. And that's the sense of sometimes we think, again, we have to have everything perfect, or my life is messed up, or I don't want to invite someone into my mess. Those kind of things. And just recognize, it doesn't matter. It's not really about you. It's about Jesus inside of you. And how that looks and works. That's the key thing to talk about. Fourthly, meeting a need. So on Wednesdays, and a few of the discipleship groups too have been doing a Discovery Bible study. And part of the reason I like that method is one of the questions that we're asked every week as a group is there someone someone in the group or someone that has a need that we can meet? And all that question is doing is getting us to look beyond ourselves and say, where can we meet a need? Because a lot of times those needs become open doors for the gospel. And it begins in that way. That's why, if you wonder why we have a kids club right now, is because I met one mom who had kids, and she's growing her faith, and I wanted her to meet with Stacy, but she had a bunch of kids, and the only way she could meet with Stacy is if I did some with the kids. Voila, a kids club was born. Well, that was a need, right? So, sometimes someone has a need for food. At times if someone's just been in the hospital or come out of the hospital, maybe it's pet sitting, and if it is, tell Ruthie because she wants to watch dogs. So, child care, then talk to Mariah. She's on the docket for that. Helping with home, projects. I got some siding that needs to go up in my house. So you just look for needs. I'm just helping you guys with this. And use your gifts. And we're going to talk about gifts next week, so there's a little feeder for you. But God has given each one of us gifts, not only spiritual gifts, but just things within our lives. And just use them. Use them to meet needs. Next, hold your standards but not your high horse. I kind of said this already. There's a sense of when you're interacting with non-believers and you're spending time with them, they're not going to, their life is not always going to be as it should, which I could say about all of our lives. I'm not saying that in fact, we should not lower our standards. God has called us to standards of holiness, to be more like Him, and we're supposed to pursue Him for all that we can. But just, I like the concept of your high horse. Literally, get off of your horse. Sorry, Julia. But don't keep your horse with you. But just get off your horse and walk with them. Walk alongside of them. And, so just walk by their side. The next one is really important. They're all important. Get a support team. When you look at Jesus, when He sent His disciples out, He sent them out in twos. He did not send them out alone. If you look at the early church, there's very few exceptions that I can find where people were by themselves. Philip might be one example of that story. You look at Paul, the Apostle Paul, great missionary that he was always with somebody else. The one exception I can see in his life, and you can probably tell me more, was he was in Athens. And when he was in Athens, he was actually waiting for his team. That's why he was by himself. He was waiting for his team to come so they could continue on together. So don't go by yourself. Now, sometimes you have to in the situations, but don't. And this last week, on Friday, we went to go visit Lenine and Yader over at their house. And Caleb came with me, which is great because we both speak really bad Spanish. You put it together and it's like mediocre Spanish, so it works well. But then Logan came along too. He doesn't speak any Spanish, but it doesn't matter because he just walk alongside, right? Come along and build a relationship. So that's the thing. If you're going to do something, just bring somebody with you, and you can fumble through it together, and it's just more fun, right? If nothing else. So bring somebody with you, and then lastly, going back to the Logan example, just be there. It's just a ministry of presence. Listen, I lived in Mexico for a year. I sat through so many meetings where I went with my mentor, and he was a carpenter, and we sat in some guy's carpenter shop. I remember this, and they were talking. I have no idea what they're talking about because I just showed up, and I was like, I'm there. I don't know why I'm there. I don't know what spiritual significance I did because I was there, but I was there, and I was just there. I think we experienced it when we went to Romania. But what happened, we had translators in, and what happened is people say, why did you come all the way, halfway across the world to come here? And I was like, because we love you, because God is in us, because this is what the Lord has called us to. And even our presence makes a difference. And I wish I had some amazing stories for you. Usually they're not amazing stories. They're just, we're there, and we're showing that we love you. So those are some key things. Let me cap up those 8 questions when I want to. There you go. Okay. These are the 8 questions I asked in case you forgot. What is hospitality? Simply being friendly and generous. Why is it important? It's how we evangelize and disciple. And I'd say it's how we do it well. Why does it matter what my attitude is? Because a bad attitude is worse than no hospitality at all. Why should I want to be hospitable? This is how we live out our theology. This is how we live out our doctrine. Let me just say, people, non-believers in particular, they don't care about our doctrine. Now, I want us to care about our doctrine. Our doctrine matters, but they don't care. They don't care. They're not asking, well, do you believe this, or I'm not sure about this. They're just like, you believe in God? That's interesting. That's their level of doctrine, okay? So live out our theology through hospitality. What happens if we're not hospitable? Our theology is separate from our lives. How do I do it? My favorite simple one, just focus on the other person's needs. How do I grow in it? Just see the need. To ask God to reveal the needs they are here. It's not that they're not here, just that we would see them. And then lastly, what about hospitality with my neighbors, with non-believers specifically? Have a heart, but not an agenda. I had mentioned this earlier, but hospitality isn't just inviting people into your home, it's a mindset. It's a way of looking at things. It should be taking place. Lord, I pray it's taking place here in our church, in our places of work, where we go to school, the grocery store, our neighborhood. The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we caught up in ourselves and our to-do lists? Or are we looking for those alone, those strangers? Are we trying to make them feel welcome? This last quote, again, from my new favorite website, Hospitable Homemaker. She said, hospitality is powerful, it is beautiful, it is ordinary, and it is accessible for each of us on a daily basis.